See, you know that work culture has gotten to be too much when even Santa Claus, who works one day a year, is like, I gotta retire.
I'm too old for this shit.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Today we are talking about the Santa Clauses. The Santa Clauses picks up decades after the events of the original trilogy and follows Santa Claus as he feels the weight of age and begins considering retirement and a replacement Santa. It stars Tim Allen, Elizabeth Mitchell, Cal Penn, Elizabeth Allen Dick, and Austin Kane. So it is Christmas once again, and once again I want to talk about one of my favorite Christmas movies. My family has like a big 6 or 7 that we watch every year. And if you probably saw my Instagram story, you saw that I was trying to decide between this and the Polar Express. I'm going to do the Polar Express next year because actually I talked about it a little bit in terms of like the music and everything, but I've never talked about the Santa Claus. And with the Santa Clauses out this year, it just made more sense. Especially considering the Santa Claus is one of our favorites to watch. And it is one that is heartwarming, but a little cheesy. And I love it for that. It's funny because it is the most different because I didn't realize until actually watching it this year how much of the North Pole isn't in the first one. And that's funny because honestly that sort of makes the first one the best because the stuff in the North Pole is where that cheesiness sort of comes in. Even if it is more nostalgic and fun, it's got a lot of like those sets and funny iconic moments, kind of like the Goonies or Hook, where it's like it feels kind of like the 80s, like it's not polished or perfect, but it's very memorable and very like childhood and fun. But it is the most grounded. It is, I would say, the most heartwarming because of it being so grounded, and it's probably the one that is mostly for adults. Because the others, being at the North Pole, it's more geared towards kids, I think. But the first one, especially with all the themes and a lot of more of the jokes as well, and the fact that Scott isn't completely Santa Claus yet, it is more for adults, I think. And I really, really like that first one, especially when it comes to Neil. Those have to be the best jokes that are made. When anything that Scott says about Neil is the funniest.
That's how he feels, Neil. Come on. Nice sweater, buddy.
So then, of course, with the next two being more in the North Pole, obviously it feels more geared towards kids, but there still are a lot of things that adults can love, especially if you watch the first one as a kid. Growing up, then you're like, okay, I'll watch the next one and the next one. And actually, I feel like I've only seen the second one once, but I do remember it being pretty good. And with the whole trying to find a Mrs. Claus, definitely that is like a really interesting concept that they had in that one. And then, of course, you get the third one, which is considered obviously the worst, but it does have some really great moments. But I just remember thinking that Martin Short's Jack Frost was so cool. I mean, I've always just loved the character of Jack Frost. I thought he's always been super awesome. Oh, we're gonna get to that one. So that was the original trilogy, and obviously now we have the Santa Clauses, which is decades later, and it's on Disney Plus. It's a limited series, and I was interested to see what this was gonna do. Starting off with the highs, Tim Allen and Elizabeth Mitchell coming back and falling right back into their roles as Santa Claus and Mrs. Claus. I was a little surprised, honestly, that Tim Allen would want to do it. Honestly, I was surprised that he would want to do a second and a third to begin with, because apparently it was kind of like with the Grinch and Jim Carrey, that all that makeup on him, it got to him, like it's a lot of stuff to be underneath, and it really got to him, and he was getting very annoyed, and he was trying to be Santa Claus for the kids on set, like he was Santa Claus for those really young kids who thought that they were just acting with Santa Claus, but it was getting hard for him to not be very resentful and annoyed, so I was really surprised that he would want to do this a fourth time. But they did a great job once again. I think they were honestly the best parts because they really feel like they love these roles and they are just enveloping themselves in it. Especially Elizabeth Mitchell. She was so funny. She was really cool, and she's just like that cool mom, but she also like has the Christmas spirit, obviously, and really wants to be a part of that. As well as there are some other cameos from the original trilogy. I won't say which ones. You probably can guess which ones, and you may have seen some stills before. But just in case you haven't, I won't spoil what they are, but they were very fun. And in terms of new characters, my absolute favorite was this new head elf. Kind of like we had Bernard. The new head elf, Betty, she was awesome. I don't know. She's very sarcastic, very on the ball. She's like, we got to get things done. But she's just funny. I don't know. I just really liked this actress. I mean, she definitely feels like one of those actresses that is like beyond her years, kind of deal. But yeah, I really really liked her because you can tell that like she is that like hardened, like she has to be like the leader and keep everybody on track, but she's got like a soft center. So in terms of the story, obviously it has some very fun, very hilarious moments. I was a little surprised because a lot of the humor, which I'll get to in a second, is something. Then they would just pull out these jokes that I was like, why was that so funny? There were definitely some that I was like a little surprised were in here, and they were just scattered throughout. It was like mostly kind of kid humor, and then you get this random joke that's like, wait, that's genuinely pretty funny. And a lot of them were kind of meta too. My favorite being they point out that Mrs. Claus doesn't even have a first name. She's like the whole time she's like, "What is my first name?" Like it was that kind of stuff was funny. Also, the concept was pretty cool. How it's executed is another thing, but the concept itself of like him retiring, bringing this new guy in, and the new guy is less about the Christmas magic and more about the delivery system because he's like this failed delivery guy, and so he tries to use this as like a platform for a new system. And I gotta be honest, that was a pretty interesting take on it. Okay, so I have two middles. One is that they don't necessarily retcon things like in a Star Wars way, but they do kind of like add stuff to the canon that's like, well, I mean, technically, it doesn't mess with anything. It doesn't conflict with anything we've had before, but it's definitely like you had to think of a way to put this in there where it still made sense with the original rules. Because obviously, with all the Santa Claus stuff, there are rules to it in terms of what happens and the process by which it happens. And they stick to a lot of those things, but there are some that I was like, okay, yeah, you're treading in like territory of, I don't quite believe it that wasn't just like squeezed in there, but it's fine. My other middle's really small, about 10 seconds long. It is the theme song, like the intro. It is weird, man. It's like almost psychedelic. I don't know what they were thinking. Like it's fun. The last couple of seconds are like more so what you would think it would be, but the first part was like, what the hell was that? Okay, I will admit there are a couple of lows. The first is quick. It's just CGI, and I don't know if this is if the Marvel team of CGI artists who left affected all other Disney shows. The CGI actually for the rest of the show, for the most part, was okay, but the first episode was rough. The reindeer flying, especially, that's unfortunately like the first 2 minutes. So it's like, oh no, is this going to be the whole show? It wasn't the best. It gets a little bit better, but there are just generally some weird ways that they shoot things and that they have like these specific moments. And I thought it was like, that's a little odd, but okay. In terms of characters, there is this one elf who is like really fun and funny and heartwarming for the first 2 minutes of the series, and then his bit gets old. He is so annoying. He's not that fun. He's got the heart, but all the jokes and stuff, the way his personality is, it's like, okay, that would be fun for like a 6-year-old maybe, but he just got really grating, unfortunately. He's nice, but he's just grating. And then the other one that I was a little surprised about was Cal Penn. He's a good actor, and I don't know whether it was the writing or the directing or what. I will say the writing had a lot to do with his character's flaws, but it was like he was talking to like the audience of like kids, like in Dora, like the whole time. The way all of his lines, like the thing is he has only his daughter, so he does talk to his daughter who was a child a lot, but even then, it's like she's a smart child. He's talking to her with these very basic, generic lines, as if she's like 3 years old. And I don't know, it felt like it was like that towards the audience the whole time, and only his character. Like the writing here and there was spotty anyway, because it felt like they were just kind of like putting out generic lines to get through the show. But with his character specifically, it definitely feels like it's like, I've learned very basic lessons, or like, ooh, can you ever forgive me? I'm sorry. Like, I don't know. I thought his character was okay. It was just kind of caricaturish. And then the last thing is that it generally is just kind of cringy. like not to be that person. And this gets into an entirely different topic in terms of what Disney's been doing and the type of content they've been putting out. And I might talk about that in my live stream, maybe, I'm not sure. But for this one, they're taking like the meta, which I did like some of them, like the Mrs. Claus thing, but the meta and especially like pop culture reference jokes, like to the max, and it doesn't quite work for this because it's more of a nostalgic thing, and it's for these people who grew up with the Santa Claus. And, it feels like it's very, you can have modern stuff in it, that's fine. But I don't know, there's just some things where they reference like certain artists or certain songs or movies or whatever where it's like, I don't know, it just feels a little cringy, like you're just trying too hard. And just some of the things, without, again, getting too into it, there are some PC things that, I can appreciate, but they don't really need to be there. PC jokes, specifically like, oh, all the Santa Clauses were men. Like, yeah, Santa Claus, like that's just what he's been. I don't know. But anybody who's watched a lot of Disney recently might understand what I'm talking about. And again, I can get into that a little bit more maybe in the live stream. That's a tough topic to talk about right now. So overall, the Santa Clauses was not the best that I was hoping for, but it was still very fun. And it had a lot of great moments. It had some really good characters. There were some things that I definitely like, especially in the finale, which honestly I thought was pretty good compared to a lot of the Disney finales the Disney Plus finales that I've seen recently. I thought was actually they did a good job, and they brought a lot of things in from the original trilogy again in the finale, which I thought was pretty cool. But it does feel like Disney's sort of just like spitting out stuff just to have content, And I know that Marvel especially is trying to redo Phase 5 for quality over quantity, which I think is a very, very good step. And I think that all of Disney should be focusing on that because, again, I liked the idea that they did this and what they were doing with it. But it does feel like they were just kind of throwing it out just to have more content. The other thing was that, yeah, it just feels like it was very, very kiddish, which doesn't really quite make sense considering all of the kids who watched the original Santa Claus and grew up with those are now adults. You can appreciate it. There are a lot of fun things, and, unless a Christmas show is like absolute trash, you can't hate it because it's Christmas. So it's not the best thing, but it had a lot of great stuff. I am glad I watched it at least once. I'm going to give the Santa Clauses a 2.5 out of 4. Well, guys, if you watched the Santa Clauses, let me know what you thought of it. Let me know what your favorite of the original trilogy is, and I hope that you have a very blessed and safe Christmas. I hope that you get to be around the people that you love. And as always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and Christmas magic right in the middle. I'll see you guys later.
I don't even wear pajamas. Normally I sleep naked. Fuck naked. Ah!
Morning, Mr. McGuire. Catherine.